Hello, third graders.
Welcome back.
It's time for TV Classroom. How are you today? Before we begin, let's check in with your zones.
Sure.
How are you feeling today? What zone are you in? You know, Oliver does this thing when he's thinking or trying to find something. I wonder where he gets it from. Me. How are you, Miss Aslan?
I'm good. I have lots of questions about lots of stuff going on in my brain right now.
Me too.
So I'm a little bit distracted, so I guess that would call me in the yellow zone.
Just turn it down if you can.
But yeah, I think I can focus. How are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way. I have lots of questions about things that are happening, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
There's just a lot happening
Yeah.
at the moment. So my brain's a little bit distracted, but I am very excited to study about more of the indigenous people of Washington State.
Yes, and our third graders will be happy to know we still have our list going that we started during our last lesson.
We did, because if you don't know, we filmed these in batches on days. So this is actually the same day that we're filming that we filmed the other lesson. We just finished the other lesson. So we may have more questions that we need to write down and get answers to. We haven't found answers yet because we haven't had time. Mr. Kevin, how are you today?
Oh,
He's needing his coffee.
needs his
it seems like.
coffee.
Welcome and hello from the control booth. I'm in the green zone today, teachers.
Oh, good.
Good.
Happy to be here with you and looking forward to more fascinating facts about our Native American friends. And I just really enjoyed the last lesson. I just want to
good.
let you know. It was there are a lot of things I didn't know.
I
Yep.
learned a lot when I was preparing for this lesson. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Very cool.
Today and every day. when
Oops.
we- Oops.
There we go.
Spoiler alert.
3 personal standards.
Show respect,
Make good decisions.
solve problems.
And we're showing respect one of the ways. We do it in a lot of ways. But one of the ways we are actively choosing to show respect is by honoring the indigenous land and people of the Pacific Northwest.
We do that by, I'm going to invite you to look outside your window. Look at the sky and the trees, your surroundings. Our physical space stands on the unceded land of the Coast Salish people. We acknowledge the Coast Salish community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We make this acknowledgement as part of our work to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and white supremacy.
So we talked about that unceded part last episode, and we
Yes.
talked about the treaty that happened in Nia Bay and how they lost their land. It was unceded.
And we talked about settler colonialism.
We did. These people that came to come and settle here. We heard about Lewis and Clark. They were settlers that came. And some of them brought diseases, and they didn't realize they were bringing diseases and made the indigenous people really sick, which would be really hard.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand the people because they didn't know their culture. And so it just was a really difficult time.
Yes. And we recognize that. We're continuing to learn about it.
We are. Because that's how when we know better, we do better.
I love that you say that. You say that often, and I really appreciate that reminder.
Thanks. Yeah, it's something I've learned over time, that it's just important to recognize that we're just always learning and knowing better.
And also the responsibility of then doing better.
You can't just know, you have to do.
Yep.
It's like when you say you're sorry and you do the same thing again. Nope.
So we're going to continue to talk today about how did the environment influence the development of Northwest Native American cultures.
Now, last time we talked about the coastal people.
We did.
And those tribes and some of the things that they used, not all of them, not even close, just a few of the things that the land influenced for them. Today, we're going to talk about the Plateau people who lived on the plateau, the indigenous people of the Plateau area. A few pictures for you to look at. We just want you to look at it. You can take notes if you'd like. What do you notice? What are you thinking? Why is this important? What do you notice, Ms. Haslin?
I noticed that it looks like the plateau, the land up high, it looks dry, but I also see greenery there towards the bottom of the picture. And is that a river or a stream?
It looks like a stream.
Okay.
You know what I notice?
What did you notice?
I don't see any big cedar trees.
Ooh, that's different.
Really different. That's beautiful. Look at that flat land on top, and then the water comes through into that falls. That's gorgeous. Again, I don't notice any trees. Knowing how important trees were for the coastal people, it has me wondering
About
how they survived. Because without the cedar trees, I mean, that was
their transportation, their clothing,
right.
their
It
shelter.
was everything.
It's how they made money in the 1900s.
When settlers came, like what? Makes me a little bit nervous but I know that the Plateau people survived and were great and thrived, so I'm very curious as to how that worked. Look at that. Like I see that flat land, it's like, wow, they have so much land to live on. But then they're so exposed.
There's no shade.
I don't see any kind of like shelter, shade, places to hide,
Easy access to water.
places to hide to be able to hunt. Yeah, to get to the water, you have to go all the way down the cliff. Yes, Mr. Kevin?
I was just going to say, I know that there are natural caves in some of the rock formations of the plateau.
Okay.
Natural
so maybe they
caves.
used those.
They may have.
Let's look at our big social studies words.
Ooh, we learned 2 new ones last week.
Mr. Kevin, are you ready?
Big social studies word.
We hope you do that with us. We enjoy it. Maybe it's an adult thing.
Maybe.
We enjoy being silly. But, oh well. Anthropologist.
Ooh, that is a scientist who studies humankind.
Macaw.
That is an indigenous tribe of Nia Bay in Washington.
Yep. Coast.
That is land next to the ocean.
What are our new words?
Spokane.
Ooh.
Capitalized again.
Must be a place.
I said a city in eastern Washington.
It is.
We are going to talk about Spokane being a tribe of Indians inhabiting northeastern Washington. And we talked about how we're using a variety of words to describe our
Indigenous people.
And I took this word Indians from the Spokane tribe's website.
So there you go. So we're using,
The word that they used.
right, because we're talking about them. So we should find out what they want to be called.
So I did that.
Awesome.
Spokane ancestors were a river people. I also got that information from the Spokane tribe's website.
Think about all of those pictures we just saw. There were rivers and water streams. They had a lot of access to water, but a different kind of water.
Yes.
There were some rivers for the coastal people, but their access to water was the Pacific Ocean.
Yes.
These people don't have access to the river. We saw in our first input chart, like there's no river there. I mean, no ocean there
No
for them to
ocean.
access.
Yeah.
Huh.
And since we're talking about
Plateau.
plateau people, our other word is going to be plateau. So what is a plateau? My prediction was like a plate.
Yep.
And a plateau is a high-level area of land, just like those photos that we looked
Yeah,
at.
you could really see the plateau in all of those.
And a sentence was, the plateau is at the top of the mountain, or there is a plateau at the top of the mountain.
Perfect.
Beautiful. So let's check back in with our inquiry chart.
Right, because we learned more last time.
We did. And now that we know some more words, Spokane and plateau, that might be bringing up some questions, like you said.
Right, or like longhouse, or smoking to store, or cedar bark. There's lots of things. So what do you think you know now about Native American cultures? And what do you want to know? I think I know that there are a lot of different Native American cultures, and they don't all do the same thing, and they don't all have the same things.
Yep,
And I think that's really important to point out.
I agree.
Because sometimes people, you say Native American, and they get this picture in their head of one type of person, but that might not be representative of the culture of the person that they're talking about.
Or they think about Native Americans in their traditional dress.
And that's the only way they think of
and
them.
that's the only way they think of them.
And we can tell them by the pictures we've seen of people when they could take pictures. It's not how they always dress. They had normal wear that they wore, blankets and cedar bark clothes, and then they had traditional dress that they wore for ceremonies and important gatherings like we do. We don't all walk around in a suit and tie and wedding dresses every day.
No.
No.
And it also doesn't mean that our indigenous people now are walking around in cedar clothing.
Right. If they wanted to, they could. But I know a lot of indigenous people that wear normal clothing, but when they do special events, they wear that special traditional
The
clothing.
traditional clothing. Yep.
All right.
Oh, we have
Ooh.
a new chant.
Plateau tribes everywhere.
This was adopted by Rachel Hoff in 2008. So thank you, Rachel.
I actually know Rachel. Hi, Rachel.
Oh.
Yep. I taught it with her in Highland School District the
That's
first
exciting.
6 years of teaching.
Oh.
Yep.
Thanks, Rachel.
All
Okay,
right.
here we go. Plateau tribes here, plateau tribes there, plateau tribes everywhere. Artistic plateau tribes carving, strong plateau tribes harpooning, ingenious.
Oh, I said indigenous.
You did.
Sorry.
No.
Ingenious plateau tribes constructing, spiritual plateau tribes chanting, plateau tribes dressed in deerskin, plateau tribes inside the pit house, plateau tribes next to the river, plateau tribes digging for camas root, plateau tribes here, plateau tribes there, plateau tribes everywhere.
Okay.
Pit
now-
house.
Pit house. I have never heard that word before.
I'm going to teach you something new today, Miss
Okay.
Oslin.
Teach me, teach me.
So today we are talking about the, can you guess?
Yeah.
The plateau people.
So these must be the people who lived on the plateaus, which are the high level.
And it's actually really big. It extends
Yeah.
all the way into Idaho, up into Canada, down into Oregon. It's really large, the Columbia Plateau. So these are the people that live there. So let's talk about first their housing, just like we did with the coastal people. So their shelter. How did they keep safe and warm or cool from the environment and the things happening?
Because it must be very hot and dry,
Ah,
exposed.
we're going to talk about that when we get to the land. Yeah.
Okay.
So they actually had 3 types of shelter.
Oh.
One of them, a longhouse. They built longhouses.
Because they could get cedar from the coast and you could move the longhouse
Yeah.
that we learned. So they could have moved it to
So,
the
and I don't know,
plateau.
maybe they traded with people, or maybe they
Oh.
went and used a different type of wood to make the longhouse. I don't know that information.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
They also had pit houses, and on these pit houses, they would drape deer skins and different woven things and have like a little entrance that they would go into, but to protect from the elements. And then there was always a hole at the top to help the smoke escape. So they had a pit house as well. A lot of times in winter they'd be in there.
Okay.
And in the summer because it was
Warmer.
cool with the
Oh,
clay would make it cool.
Okay.
Then they learned this from the plains people. So something that's interesting about the Plateau tribe is the plateau was kind of like I-90 for us,
Oh.
where it allows you to go from one place to another state.
Okay.
It was a place that people traveled through to get from the plains to the coast.
Okay.
So they learned from people as they migrated from the plains over to the coast, and from the coast over to the plains, which is where they learned about
Teepee.
longhouses,
Yeah.
and they learned about teepees. Now, the teepees they started using after they learned it from the plains people. So it wasn't originally what they used. Originally, they used
the
pit
pit house.
houses. But as they learned, they had a variety of things. Now, the reason the teepee was nice is imagine having to, you're going to learn in a minute that these are nomadic people. They move to find their food. Imagine having to deconstruct and reconstruct this every night.
That would take a lot of time.
A lot of time and a lot of work, where the teepee was just poles, and then sometimes it was like deer skin or fabrics.
Okay.
And they'd be able to go in, and it had a hole at the top so that their smoke could come out. So much easier
Much easier to pack up and move.
to be able to pack up and move. Isn't that cool?
So they were in the pit house typically in the winter and then in the summer.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
It just depended on where they were and what they were doing.
Okay.
If they were moving, they weren't in a pit house.
Right.
Because a pit house is really hard to move. They might have been in a longhouse or in the teepee.
Okay.
Okay, so then how did they move?
Yes.
Talk about that they move a lot. Oh, something I forgot. Something that goes along with this is the camas root. They had a lot of camas root that they were able to eat. It was a really large portion of their diet. And that camas root was all around where they were living. They traveled to find it, and then they would set up and they would harvest it and take it. So how did they travel? Well, at first, they walked. So their first form of transportation was walking. They did have some small canoes, but that wasn't their main source of transportation for being on the river, but they were very small. Then, in 1730, they traded with the Plains tribes. The first trade with the Plains tribes was in 1730. Do you know what they traded?
Something for transportation.
Hmm? What might they have had in the Plains for transportation? Horses.
Horses.
So then they had horses that they could use to transport themselves and goods, which allowed them to be able to trade with other tribes and groups. And they had these really cool sleds that they would make, and it was woven, and it allowed them to drag things or people behind on the horse,
Oh.
and allowed them to move easier to find their food. And the tribes moved to find food depending on the season. So thinking about the land here in a minute, I wonder where they would move during different seasons. Can you think of anything? Thinking about all those pictures we saw, what might they do when it's winter or when it's summer?
Thinking about in the winter in the mountains, it can be cold and snowy and hard to move and hard to find resources. So I would think that in the winter they would move out of the mountains.
Maybe. So let's talk about the land.
All right.
That might give us a better idea.
Yeah.
So the land that they had was high or low down into a canyon, flat,
Plateau.
and it was hot in the summer, very hot, and very cold in the winter. So they had to move around to be able to get their needs met depending on the season. Where the coastal tribes, it's a temperate area. They didn't have to move around. They could
Right.
just stay where they were. But the plateau people were always moving. Now, they lived next to a lot of streams. Okay? And there was this stuff called tuckreed, and it was something that they made a lot of their baskets and some of their clothing
Oh.
out of.
Tuckreed.
And it was along the riverbanks. And along the riverbanks, you know what they did?
They fish.
They fished for salmon. Because we know salmon migrate up rivers to their birthplace, but they caught them with big nets. And so
Made out
they
of
would
tuckreed?
eat. Yep. And so they would eat salmon or other fish they could find, trout, whatever it was that was in the water.
Okay.
So that's what they did. They had fish to eat. They used the tuckreed. They would travel to find seeds and roots to eat. And they traveled all over the Columbia Plateau, sometimes into the plains, sometimes into the coast.
Wow.
Okay?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Where should we go next?
Well, I'm thinking about if they didn't really have access to cedar trees, and we know that the coast people used cedar for some of their clothing.
Now, we said something in that chant. We said spear. And you want to know why?
Yes.
A lot of their clothing was made of scraped, tanned. That's where they like leave it out in the sun to tan. Deer hide.
Oh.
So they would hunt deer in the plains. There's a lot of deer over there in the plains. They would hunt deer for food and for their hide. They were very careful and conscientious of using all of the animal
Yep.
for their needs. Right? So it'd be like sitting on a little tree. I have a person here. It's not a very detailed drawing, but they're hanging a piece of hide here on the tree out in the sun to tan. And just like humans, if you have skin and you tan it too much, it becomes kind of like thick and hard and rough. And that's what happens with the deer hide as well.
Okay.
Last thing, I'm going to stand up for this.
Yeah.
Because I have to reach over. So, contact with the settlers. This group of people also had contact with the settlers. Guess what happened?
Was there also sickness and disease brought?
There was illness, and it was influenza
The flu.
and smallpox. We have vaccines for these things now, and smallpox is gone, so we don't have to worry about it. But they didn't then, and a
Yeah.
lot of people died. And then in 1850, which is very similar to the coastal people, 1853,
1853.
there was a Donation Act.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Where any Native American, or that any American, not Native American, any American could have native land. So what happened was, if you migrated over and you found a spot, you could have it if you were American, even though it was natives' land.
So then, where did our native people go?
Well, in 1881, that was a problem, right? So in 1881, they made the Spokane Reservation. It was a small spot of land that Native American people could have. But they had to be there on the reservation.
So they were displaced,
Yes,
and they called it a Donation Act.
yes. And that, just like what we talked about with the coastal people, doesn't make me feel very good.
Right.
I know now, so now we do better.
Yeah.
So there's things to be learned about contact with the settlers. I also want to talk about the land.
Yes.
How did the land shape the culture of the Plateau people? We talked a lot about the cedar with the coastal people. What about the Plateau people?
Well, we learned that the plateau was high and flat, hot in the summer, and cold in the winter.
It definitely shaped the kind of housing that they used.
Yes. It
And go ahead.
they ate different things.
They did.
Sort of, because they
had
had
fish.
salmon as well, but camas root.
Yep, didn't have that on the coast, but they don't have clams or crab. So they ate a lot of roots and fish. That was their diet, and deer.
And deer.
On the coastal side, it was a lot of fish and crabs and clams and all of like the sea life mammals. That's what they ate. Over here, they ate land mammals, like deer.
And
But clothing was different.
it was.
They used animal hides instead of barks and reeds.
They had access to the plains people to learn from and
Right,
trade
trade
with.
with.
Whereas our coastal people,
If the plains people came over, they had
Yeah,
access, but
yeah.
they didn't have the vast access that the Plateau people had to learn from. Really interesting, isn't it?
very interesting.
So the land definitely, especially the placement of it, allowed them to learn a lot.
Oh yeah,
So we have some pictures.
we do.
This is camas root.
Oh,
It's a beautiful flower. So they would dig it up and eat the root that was in the bottom.
oh nice.
Kind of like a potato. But that's what the plant looks like.
Wow, you could eat it and then put the flower in your hair.
You could,
Yeah.
or use that flower to create a dye, to dye something. 'Cause
Yes.
it's purple.
Very
So
cool.
peeling camas bulbs in preparation for drying or cooking.
It's a lot of camas bulbs.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Like I said, they're kind of like a potato. Isn't that amazing? And I wonder if they would plant some. However, thinking about knowing that they move around a lot, I bet they didn't. Because they probably weren't there long enough to have a full cycle
to
of
harvest
that.
it. Yeah.
But I could be wrong. You can say, oh, go back to that.
Oh.
Look in the background on the right-hand side. What do you see?
Oh.
A longhouse.
that a long- yeah.
I think it is, yeah. Huh. What's going on here?
That person's wearing jeans, so this is
Current day.
modern-ish day.
But
Yeah.
look what they're doing. They're fishing with a net.
A dip net. That handle
dip
is
net.
so long.
But that's what the person in our picture was doing in my
Wow.
input chart. So this person, it's modern day, right? They probably have some modern metals and things that they're using. But they got the design of it from their ancestors on how to fish humanely with a net.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Kevin?
I just noticed that the spelling of Yakima is different than what we spell on the map.
Correct, because we spell it with the English way,
Yeah.
and this is spelled the way that the natives spell it. So we have some spellings that are different because of our spelling rules and phonics rules.
Oh.
So this is some traditional dress and some everyday dress.
Yeah. So it's about 1907.
Yeah. And this is a group of Plateau people as well, called, I don't know how to pronounce that. Kootenai would be my guess.
Teachers, I think it's Kootenai.
Kootenai.
I'm looking it up, though.
Okay.
Thank you.
What do you see in the background?
Teepees.
A teepee. Look at that. But look at their clothing. It looks like clothing.
Definitely like traditional Native American dress.
And I also see some things that look more of English culture.
Yes.
So I wonder, did they do some trading?
Oh.
Did they trade some of their goods for some of the clothing that might have been warmer for them as they were traveling?
It also says that
Like
they
that
were,
plaid blanket underneath. Do you
they
see
were
that?
modeling the dress for a
Right.
photograph. So I wonder if this was like settler curiosity and having
Maybe.
them model and take pictures.
It looks like it might have been. And in the back, it almost looks like I can see some settlers in the back. Do you see them in the
I
background?
do.
So like the people don't look, I mean, they might be happy about it. I don't know. What I know about faces in our culture is that that's not a happy face. But I don't know. In their culture, it may be different. Because different cultures express their emotions in different ways.
And back before we had cameras like we have now,
Right.
people often didn't smile for photos because it took a long time for the picture to be taken.
Right. So you don't want to sit there and smile
Smile.
for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Kevin.
It's Kootenai.
Kootenai.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Drying salmon.
Drying salmon on
Just like
racks.
you showed
Look
us.
at those racks. So it looks like the people of the plains also use salmon drying racks for their food as well, because they were also getting fish and salmon.
And also needed to preserve it.
See how important salmon are?
So important. Oh, look, it's a longhouse. You can see how someone could take that down.
Yes,
It'd be a lot of work to move it,
it would be.
which is why they were so grateful when they found out about teepees.
Yep.
It made it so much easier to move. What do you see?
Is that a pit house?
That's a pit house. Pretty cool, huh? So they use the earth, and then they use like blankets and woven things to drape all over it, make lots of layers so that the rain doesn't get through.
Yeah. Keep the heat in.
Or the snow, yep, and they have like a little chimney up top. Do you
yes,
see that?
I do. Poking up.
There's one kind of teepee. There's many different ways of making a teepee. And I was reading that even today now, Native people from the Plateau area, they'll use teepees for like camping and special events.
yeah.
They still use them for that, but they don't live in them on the daily basis.
Right.
They live in regular houses now.
Right.
Ooh. That looks a little more modern day, doesn't it?
It does. I see like
I see some
more,
houses.
a more traditional home or
See
modern day home.
fences. So it changed. So how did the environment influence the development of Northwest Native American cultures when it comes to the Plateau people?
And that's what we're going to be writing about today, thinking about the Spokane tribe or Plateau tribes. Spokane's just one.
One of them. Yeah, so that's your job on Flipgrid today. You are going to write, how do you think the environment influenced this Native culture and the way that they lived? Next time, we're going to compare the two.
Yes.
We're going to do some note taking, some sentence writing, comparing the coastal people with the Plateau people, and talk about where their cultures overlap and where their cultures are different.
Now, if you are not comfortable posting on Flipgrid, that's okay.
Totally
Mr. Kevin
fine.
has 2 other ways that you can share with us what your thinking is.
That's right, third graders. Open that laptop and go to the email and type in TV Classroom at tacoma.k12.wa.us.
That's right.
You can always send us something in the regular mail. The teachers will respond. If you send us something in the mail, we'll send something back
We
in
will.
the mail.
Yep.
And guess what? There could be prizes inside that envelope
There could be.
for you. So TV Classroom, 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.
All right, friends, time for our affirmation. I can be aware,
Ooh,
or I am
I
aware.
am aware. I was just going to say that.
Aware of your surroundings, aware of our history, aware of other people's perspectives, aware of how what you do impacts others.
Ooh, intent versus impact.
Sometimes
Good
I do
one.
things and don't mean for something to happen, but it does. So then what do I do about it?
All right, I am aware. So
Here
I'll
we
take
go.
a deep breath together and say our affirmation.
I am aware.
Excellent job today, third graders. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time in our TV classroom.
Bye, friends. See you on Flipgrid.
Rules. 1. You have 10 seconds to pick your crewmate. 2. A new timer will appear with an exercise for the crewmate you picked. 3. You will get 10 points for each correct crewmate and exercise you choose. 4. If you pick the imposter, you will lose all your points. 5. See how many points you can get. Good luck.